And I got a chance to meet Larry Scott and saw him pose from the audience, and wow, what a moment that was. I mean, you've probably read about that, about Larry Scott, his appearance there was just tremendous.
I never saw it, never had the opportunity to go and see the Mr. Olympia when Larry Scott won. But I remember reading religiously, and he was so impressive in those days. You know, he had that blonde hair, he had that real California look.
The next year, we Mr. Olympia, and I said, I'm going to go in this one more year. Because I know that the happiness doesn't exist on the stage. It exists in the family. So I want to win it the second time, so at least I can say that it wasn't a one-time thing. I won it twice. And then I'm going to retire.
Larry won the Olympia in 65 and 66 in really outstanding fashion. But he was also aware of somebody coming up behind him real fast.
After I was given the trophy, the second Olympia, I said, once you appreciate their loyalty and their adulation and everything, and that's what I told him. I told him from my heart. It was a great honor. It's not something for a little Pocatello kid to get this kind of an honor, and I really appreciated him. But tonight is my last contest.
And Larry, you know, won the title those first 2 years, and then he decided to retire. He had other things to do, and along came Sergio.
When Sergio Oliva came onto the scene, his presence was impossible to ignore. Blessed with an enormous amount of raw talent and driven by a true warrior spirit, Oliva ascended the ranks of his contemporaries with a grace that made him seem almost unreal. His nickname, The Myth, was well earned.
Joe said, I got a fella here that I want you to meet. He's from Cuba. And he's got a great body, and Joe was always bringing those kind of things just to spur you on. And so Sergio Oliva came walking back. He couldn't speak any English at all then. He was just spoke Spanish totally. But I looked at his body and I thought, I am never going to beat this guy. I'd already decided I was going to quit, but I thought, I'm glad I'm quitting because I know I'm not going to beat this guy. He's got natural blessings in his body, his proportions, his size, everything. It was just magnificent. I've never seen a bodybuilder like him.
I first met Sergio Oliva outside Gold's Gym when it was on 2nd Street in Santa Monica. That was the second location. And I still can remember these arms coming out of a Hawaiian shirt with a split in it in order to give him enough room for these huge arms. Sergio is one of the most gifted genetic bodybuilders there ever was. This huge chest, huge arms, flaring thighs, tiny waist. But he was just this incredible display of genetics, and everybody was impressed. Nobody's ever not been impressed by Sergio Oliva.
Now, I had the good fortune of meeting Sergio and becoming friends with him early on. We competed in the 1966 Junior Mr. America contest in San Jose. That was the first national contest I'd ever competed in. I was 19 at the time. And when I met Sergio, I had never seen anybody that genetically gifted. Still to this day, I haven't. I well remember this. Sergio only weighed 197 pounds that day, yet each one of his thighs measured 29 inches. His waist was only 27. He was so far advanced over the rest of us. Everybody else could have just posed their ass off, and Sergio could have stood there, and he walked away with the contest.
And Sergio just rewrote the books in terms of, you know, round muscle bellies on the small joints. He had this small head that made everything else look massive. You know, it's an illusion. I'd been to a couple of universities and seen all the guys, Arnold, Draper, Park, you know, and impressed, you know. The first time Sergio walked out, I just went back in my seat. He ambled out. There was this... Is this human? You know, it was like some sort of holograph that had been made out. The roundness of the muscles, the small waist, the size of his arms when he hit the poses. I've never shot back in my chair at anybody since. You know, it was just amazing.
Though Sergio Oliva was in the best shape of his life in the early 70s, he was succeeded handily by Arnold. As one titan faded and a new one rose into the spotlight, it was the IFBB that was slowly on the rise as the 1960s came to a close.
Well, yeah, along came the 70s, and you know, the culture of the country and the world was changing rapidly with you know, pop music and everything. The Vietnam War was in full force, which then became such a political issue here in the States. And at that time, you know, when all sorts of wild things were happening, along came Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Sent a letter to Arnold. Arnold called me back. Said, Joe, I don't have any money. I can't buy a ticket on the plane. I have nothing. All he had was his briefcase, you know, with his workout suit and shoes, nothing else.
So along came Arnold, who was a blueprint for what you wanted in a bodybuilder, what Joe Weider wanted. You know, he wanted the best bodybuilder in the world to have charisma, a PR brain, a sense of humour, somebody who could connect with an audience. You could have almost written it and said, let's get this guy.
I told him, I don't want to go home, I want to stay here. I'm near Los Angeles, and movies and everything. That's what I want to be. I said, okay, I'll pay you for your ticket to the plane. And I had a little business there in Florida, and he went to work, and he worked. He wanted to go to school, college school. I gave him money, gave him everything he wanted.
And of course, his nemesis was Sergio Oliva. And he competed 1-to-1 against Sergio several times, in which a lot of people think Sergio maybe should have won. Just maybe. The problem with Sergio is that he was dealing with Arnold, who is just the smartest bodybuilder on stage ever.
At that time, that was the first contest that he was on his mark, he looked good, and Sergio was a little bit off, and everything was right, and Arnold won. Because I well remember, we went back to the hotel that night. It was me, Dave Draper, Franco, and Arnold, and he kept saying over and over, I can't believe that I actually beat Sergio. That blew his mind that he actually had toppled Sergio. And then, of course, a few weeks later, he was able to beat him again at the Mr. Olympia.
And it was really his decision. You know, he won the Olympia in 1970 and through to 75 for 6 years, to then concentrate on the Olympia, that then made the Olympia between 70 and 75. That's when the Olympia took over as the contest to win, to decide who's the best physique on the planet.
And then after that, you got Joe's publicity machine behind him.
And there's a certain synchronicity about the whole thing. Joe got the guy he wanted. Arnold met the entrepreneur he needed. They both knew how to promote, you know, the sport as a business and make it, you know, more accessible to the public. The Olympia was established. Arnold started to train in Gold's Gym. So he had this synchronicity of, you know, the world's best bodybuilders, Zane, Draper, Franco, all in the same gym.
You can't be thinking about yourself. You cannot be worried about what's going on with you. You have to go, okay, I'm ready. I've done everything I can do. Now what's going on around me that I can take advantage of? And nobody was ever better at that than Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Coming off of wins in 1973 for Mr. America and the IFBB Mr. Universe, Lou Ferrigno continued his winning streak in the following year's IFBB Mr. Universe and the Mr. International. That same year, he entered the first Mr. Olympia, taking second. But it was in 1975 that Ferrigno's fortunes began to take an unprecedented turn.
1974 was my first competition in Mr. Olympia because I was currently the Mr. Universe twice. I won the IFBB Mr. America. And I knew I was competing against Arnold because he was my idol. I really wanted to beat him. I was only 21, he was 26. But I remember we competed together, even though he was much more superior. I only trained 3 months. I found out later on he trained a whole year for the competition. But I was on the same stage with him. In a matter of just a few years, I went from a kid who came 23rd place right on stage with the greatest Schwarzenegger. And I remember when I was on that stage with him, I said, this is such a big leap. No matter what happened in the competition, people are always going to look up to him and I. And it was incredible because it gave me the sense and the motivation to go push even harder, to train even harder. Guys like Arnold and I back 30, 40 years ago, most of the big guys would go into pro football. But Arnold and I were like the two biggest guys in bodybuilding, so when Pumping Iron came out, the public embraced us.